source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview.
The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Thursday, October 23rd, and a lot going on in the world. We have been talking this week about the races to watch, including the final debate that occurred yesterday for the New York City mayoral race that has drawn so much attention. Fox News reported New York City mayoral contenders relentlessly criticized their opponents as they made their final pitch to voters Wednesday night in the last debate before early voting starts this Saturday. Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani, independent candidate and former governor Andrew Cuomo, and Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa once again traded barbs on the debate stage, meeting for the second time in less than a week. When asked if Mamdani has any regrets about his, quote, long-standing anti-Israel views, the Democrat socialist, which Fox should really just call him a communist, affirmed his commitment to protecting Jewish New Yorkers. You won't denounce, globalize the Intifada, which means kill Jews. That was the question. There's unprecedented fear in New York. It was not, and then Cuomo said it was not several rabbis. It was 650 rabbis who signed the letter, not several. While Mamdani refused to condemn the phrase globalize the Intifada during the primary, he has since said he would, quote unquote, discourage others from using the slogan. So, this is just the clash of worldview that we find ourselves in. And then, meanwhile, here in the free state of Florida, there is a lot of concern over Florida's trajectory and who is going to succeed Governor Ron DeSantis next year in the November elections after he is term limited, and looking at the posture of America and this kind of clash of worldview overall between the left and the right, and this increasing anti-Semitic view that has somehow bubbled up in even among some of those on perhaps the far right, if we can try to maybe categorize it on a political spectrum. But there's just a lot to unpack. So let's welcome in all right, and sorry about that. I think, can you hear me? Yes. All right. Okay. So let's welcome in Daniel Horowitz, who's senior editor at The Blaze. And Daniel, as we are talking about all of this, what is your perspective overall on this clash of worldviews?
Well, my head is spinning. There's so much going on domestically, abroad. The upshot of what's going on is that we have a movement on broadly the left that is mixing communism, fascism, Islamism, and they know exactly where they want to go. They have every fiber of their movement oriented towards rowing in that direction. They actually have primary candidates against hardcore leftists that really service their views, but maybe they don't have the subcultural vibe as strong as they want it, so they want even more. And, when they control an area, if you kind of look at the Trump versus Harris political map, the areas that are blue, they control. meaning there's not a single policy, social, fiscal, sovereignty, security, that doesn't flow from their politicians that's oriented in that inexorable direction towards communism, towards, all the bad isms. And they're very consistent. They're very committed. Whereas on our side, and this sort of ties in everything in your opening, on our side, we don't have a movement. We have an industry. We have people that are engaging in political tourism. They're enjoying the water. They're enjoying the selfies. It's about podcasts. It's about monetization. It's about earning a living. Now, once in a while, you might chance upon a good talking point that we all agree on, but it's talking point deep. There is no movement that is competent, committed, knows what it believes in, knows how to accomplish it, that is committed to sticking the landing, other than just inveighing against what the Democrats are doing at a given moment, albeit we might do that while Republicans are in charge and are doing the same bad things or not fighting the bad things enough. And this is where we are. And this leads to, obviously you living in Florida and how we have the first example in generations of a person that was taking all the talking points that we supposedly believe in and implementing them and making them durable and making them stick. But now, rather than that becoming the standard in every red state, having someone like DeSantis and maybe even better, kind of, where's our Mamdani? Instead we might, not only are we not getting that elsewhere, we might even lose Florida as well. So to me, every news story, every policy issue that's going on now could be summed up in the point that we do not have a movement that believes and fights as hard as what the left has.
Yeah, and that's really the problem as I see it, is there's a lack of cohesiveness among the right in terms of, I think, the goals, for one thing, and also our strategy, because we interestingly see a lot of cohesion among the left. I mean, everybody's trying to say right now, like, I know that the big talking point, right, is Democrats are in disarray, and everybody loves to say that. But you see them, they're not. I mean, they are actually pivoting in kind of precise momentum in very specific strategic ways on very specific issues, like we've been talking about this week on this program, on their concern, the left's concern about the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. So, Obergefell versus Hodges in light of overturning Roe versus Wade. And so they have moved to then changing and trying to modify and amend the state constitutions to prevent that, basically what would be the same as trigger legislation within those constitutional provisions if that were to occur. And we're seeing that that type of precision across the board in a lot of ways, where we don't see that even on really big issues on the right. Like, we can't even agree on pro-life legislation. I mean, that to me shows we are ultimately at kind of the top. Is it disorganization? Is it a lack of understanding strategy? Is it a lack of actual cohesive ideology?
It's a lack of belief. I mean, people don't know what they believe in. And I say that because in your opening, you mentioned how you now have some of the most listened to voices on the so-called right that are adopting the Mamdani view, like not a nuanced version of it, but I mean the full shebang of pro-Gaza, pro-Arab. Somehow they'll say in one breath that Islam is incompatible with Western civilization, which we agree with, but then somehow they'll call it Gaza or Palestinian and use a different word, as if it's a different story, like Kashmir or Chechnya. No, they're all the same problem, which is jihad. But what happens is when you don't know what you believe, and it's just a matter of, A, I want clicks and monetization, and B, just whatever is going on at that moment by the incumbent Democrats, I'll complain about. but you don't know the affirmative, good, Psalm 34, turn from evil but pursue good. We might call out evil, but we don't know what affirmative good is. Then you wind up, it becomes a garbage can. And everything's conservative. Everything, whatever it is good at a given moment. Tariff this, but not tariff that. Give crony favors for this. I mean, and that's the thing. It's not like it's all bad. Trump has done some good. But the point is, it's only happenstance. But they don't have an affirmative set of objectives where they're rowing to, because I don't think they know what they believe. And this is why you can get any foreign view that just creeps in because it tickles the algorithms on Twitter with the foreign bots at a given moment. I just want to list for you an array of issues where the Florida governor is fighting, where it cuts the core of what we're trying to accomplish, basic issues, that he is the only one doing it. Because I tried to say, the reason why I conjured up this thought process is because a lot of times you step back and everyone sounds like they're saying the same thing, right? Everyone on the right will have the same platitude, but when you look carefully, when you look carefully, we don't all agree. So DeSantis is the only one that fought the abortion amendments. He's the only one that fought marijuana. He's the only one pushing abolishing property taxes on homestead. He's the only one that's pushing a complete repeal of vaccine mandates. He's the only one who fought back against the COVID vaccine, and within the state health department, now Louisiana is doing a little bit, but to this day, he's the only one. We thought when Latipo started with that, everyone would now say, no, you can't mandate on someone's body that you have to inject the stuff, especially now that we know there's a lot of potential problems. No one has followed up on that. He is the only one systematically building state-based immigration enforcement. I could tell you, because I work in all the legislatures and deal with that, there's nobody else pushing that. And you go on and on. He's the only one leaning in against blue cities, okay, trying to cut spending, countermand their liberal policies. You go to every other red state, and the cities like Houston, Nashville, they may as well be San Francisco. And he's like, no, I'm going to use the power to control. I mean, issue after he is the only one raising concerns about transhumanism and AI data centers and gobbling up of land. He's the only one rejecting the Green New Deal. You might say, what do you mean? They all oppose it. No. Every other governor wants the economic development in their state. He's like, we're not doing this carbon capture nonsense here. He is the only one fighting special interests on each one of those issues. There's special interests. So you might have certain. Oh, and by the way, he's the only one who has Reagan's view on crime. We also have the Democrat crime bubble, but then in every red state, they actually do quietly what New York does, and broadly right-leaning people complain about, the pretrial release and the weak sentencing and the juvenile nonsense. DeSantis actually had to veto numerous jailbreak bills from the legislature that no one else has done. Now, other legislatures are doing it, but we don't have a governor opposing it. You see what I'm saying? And I could list 10 other issues, and these are not nerdy issues. These are fundamentals. Okay, land use, crime, state-based immigration. He doesn't just tweet about it, but he orients every lever of government towards it, just like the left does. And this is becoming a very big problem that never before have we had such a big movement that broadly, in general terms, tickles our views and speaks to it. But then never before have we had such a movement that when the rubber meets the road and the issues are in play, the ball's in play, the primaries are in play, they actually are either silent or subverted, depending on what you're talking about, who you're talking about.
Yeah, and this is the overarching concern that I have after Governor DeSantis leaves office, and I'm speaking with Daniel Horowitz, who his podcast you got to listen to. He's a senior editor at The Blaze, really one of the smartest people that I know. I love when you get to join the program. And so, Daniel, when Governor DeSantis leaves office, I hope that he'll go on to do other things in government and, perhaps get an appointment into the Trump administration for the last 2 years until the next presidential cycle. Whether he runs or not, I think will be a call made later down the road. But I think we can still expect him to continue to fight for this country, fight for conservative values. The concern that I have is that right now, we have an actual day-to-day example of what executing conservative policy actually means tangibly. It's not just a theory. It's not conjecture. It's not a white paper. It's not a debate. It's actual execution by someone who is through and through a conservative and who has the Judeo-Christian view, who understands the founding, who isn't just trying to conserve going backwards like a lot of these people suggest, who, like some of the Claremont fellows who say, we need to know what time it is and we have to push forward and we can't care about, rules and guardrails and all this. We got to just win. Well, DeSantis is someone who cares about everything that this country has built up to this moment, but is still pushing forward and actually winning, I think, even more for Florida than the national level the Trump administration is for America. And I know that that's a pretty bold statement, but I think it's actually true because DeSantis is genuinely through and through a conservative. I mean, this is why you and I both supported him in the primary. Not because Trump isn't doing an awesome job, but because I believe DeSantis would have done even better. And so once we don't have that day-to-day example in an executive office like the Florida governor's mansion, where does conservatism go after that? Because we won't have this example. So will we just go back to kind of the conjecture and the policy theorizing, or where is the next office that either DeSantis could go to, or the next, hopefully someone will take over the governor's mansion that will continue the work that DeSantis has been accomplishing?
So, I mean, this is my biggest concern, and I would argue it's not a matter of going back to that model. We have that model that never left outside of Florida. Look, I'm not here to relitigate, the presidential election. My point is, and I was always more concerned about this, I said, look, if you want the Trump, that's great. You're not impressed by DeSantis? Awesome. Wow. So your standards must really be amazing. I'd love to see what we're electing in every other state. Let me put it this way. Trump had a greater margin of victory over Democrats in 22 states than he had in Florida, which was pretty significant. I think it was 13 points. So I want you to understand how vast America is, even in a bad year, where there's a significant portion that could always and will always eschew what the Democrats are selling. We all know the Democrats are going to come back in federally. The pendulum swings, even in a good economy. Certainly in a bad economy, it goes to the challenger. And, they're likely to come back in. But we need to build a fortress for ordered liberty in red states so we don't suffer what we did, in 2021. And it's going to be 10 times worse because, again, the pendulum gets rougher each time. The Overton window moves. They'll start arresting people like you and me, and you almost landed into really hot water. I mean, the weaponization is going to get 100 times worse. So we need people that will literally make red states, kill zones for communism. I don't mean physically, but I mean in terms of the policies. And you look and you're like, okay, name me anyone that comes to the heels of DeSantis in any of those 22 states. And I will tell you that it happens to be in this upcoming election, which, by the way, the primaries are around the corner. You basically have to have your candidate recruitment now for governor. And I'm just going to list you a name of states that Trump won by, the same or more than Florida, or a lot more than Florida, whose governors are up for re-election or an open seat. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas. Okay, it's Florida, obviously. Georgia was narrow win, but Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Ohio, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Wyoming, just to name a few. The lion's share of red state governorships are up this cycle. How many of them do we have a candidate that we have an iron in the fire that's anywhere near DeSantis territory? And if they are, do we have a support network in place for the guy, or is Trump endorsing the rhino? Like, I could tell you in Idaho, you have Brad Little, who, by the way, was one of the first Republicans to embrace Obergefell and gay marriage. Well, gay marriage before Obergefell. Typical corporatist, liberal Republican, special interest Republican. Trump went in and endorsed him for a third freaking term. Okay, people complain about Texas. You talk to any conservative, any one of our colleagues, by the way, will say Texas Republican, oh, it's terrible, look what's happening. Well, why is it terrible? Because you have a governor that he's not a bad guy, but he's not going to fight special interests. And then you have a speaker, Burrows, who gave over the chamber to Democrats. Trump just endorsed both of them. And in fact, he endorsed everyone who voted for Burrows because they voted for this school choice bill, and he said he's going to support all of them. So my challenge to our colleagues is you can't have it both ways. If you're like, yeah, we're based and we have to know what time it is. Yeah, we're actually going backwards in primaries. If we don't elect people that hold the ground, and especially if you're not impressed by DeSantis, great. I'd love to see what you're recruiting. I'd love to get better than that. But we're not. And the few times we have candidates and challengers, Trump comes in because Susie Wiles, with her Qatari money and special interests, does this. And I want people to start thinking about, particularly governors, but it's true of most offices, not so much in terms of moderate or conservative, liberal, right, populist. It's really, are you with the special interests or the whole of the people? Because what you and I believe in, the Judeo-Christian values, the sovereignty, ordered liberty, security, free markets, not crony capitalism or venture socialism. These are abstract ideas. Okay, quality of life. The governor has been very big on that. The crime, the marijuana stuff, quality of life. The land issues now with green energy and data centers. There's no money behind that. And it's very hard. All of the issues that distinguish DeSantis over everyone, there's one common denominator, and that's special interests. The reason why he's the only one fighting the pharmaceutical industry with vaccines, he's the only one fighting to abolish property taxes, he's the only one pushing back against local governments, he's the only one who is obviously literally the only one fighting against the marijuana stuff, the only one fighting for state-based enforcement. Again, I'm just naming a few issues, because on each of those issues, you're going to run up against huge problems with Republican donors. Okay? Immigration, forget it. I mean, the cheap labor, that's well known. That's as strong in the Republican Party as it ever was. The marijuana stuff, the social issues, property tax. You get what I'm saying? If you don't believe it in your core, and that is your entire tour de force, it's your entire reason of existence in politics, you're going to fall victim to special interests. So when you have people running for governor, and they're like, I'm based, and Democrats this, and I'm conservative, and with the platitudes, but they don't weigh in, and they artfully stay away from every one of the aforementioned things I just said that distinguishes the governor from the speaker.
And we got to leave it there, Daniel Horowitz, but great points. We got to have you back on to talk about it more. We'll be right back.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management. My debt problem started probably about 2016. I needed my life to change financially. I called Trinity and I ended up joining based on high credit card bills and high interest rate. And my counselor at Trinity has been great, and Trinity has been helping me to get on the right path of paying off these credit card bills, bringing down the interest rate. They have consolidated my bills into one low monthly payment. And now I am finally getting out of credit card debt. So I just want to say thank you, Trinity, for showing me a better and greater path.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Sharon, and soon I will be debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
What if healthcare could be more than bills and bureaucracy? What if it could reflect faith, foster community, and offer spiritual support? At Redeem HealthShare Ministry, the mission goes beyond medical bills. It's about honoring Christ and embracing healthcare that aligns with Christian values. Redeem members share medical expenses through monthly contributions, supporting one another in a Christ-centered community. It's not insurance, it's believers helping believers through financial support and prayer. And Redeem HealthShare provides freedom for members to select the doctors, hospitals, and treatments that are right for them. No networks, no restrictions, just faith-driven care. From everyday checkups to unexpected medical emergencies, Redeem offers flexible programs and encouragement rooted in Scripture. Because your healthcare should reflect your faith, not compromise it. More at redeemhealthshare.org.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. I first told you about William Loggins a few weeks ago. He's a social studies teacher at Horizon High School in Orange County, Florida. Mr. Loggins was ordered to remove a poster featuring Charlie Kirk from his classroom. That poster included a quote from Charlie: "Never underestimate the power of your voice and the impact you can have on the world when you speak up for what you believe in." The district office ordered Mr. Loggins to take down that poster. They said a student had complained. They also said the message was controversial and too political. Ironically, students and teachers were allowed to display gay pride flags because apparently those were not controversial or political. Mr. Loggins filed a complaint, and after an attorney got involved, the district had a change of heart, and Mr. Loggins now able to display that poster, proving that you can have an impact when you speak up for what you believe in. Be sure to bookmark my website for exclusive news for Christians, ToddStarnes.com.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
There is a concern with the World Economic Forum, and what concern is there not? Speaking of the ideological clash of worldviews between the extreme left and the conservative right, but there is a concern about a bioethicist that spoke at the World Economic Forum, and 5 ways he wants to change human bodies for the purpose and the goal of fighting climate change, which is, I think, the purported goal. My view is that the WEF actually has a lot more sinister views. They're not actually looking for anything like what they are suggesting. It's all just a very thin veneer for utter power and control and a complete disregard for human beings that are made in the image of God. But there are a few clips that are surfacing, including how this bioethicist wants to genetically modify humans so that they become allergic to meat. His proposal has a lot of different views that are very concerning. And this is Dr. S. Matthew Lau, Liao, a bioethicist. And you have to wonder where ethics comes into play into this at all for him. At New York University, and according to marketplace.org, believes that solving climate change starts with the individual. That's why he suggests we turn humans into cat-eyed, meat-allergic, semi-genius hobbit people. And his proposal is dead serious, not a kind of Jonathan Swiftian exercise, and it has economic implications. It's centered around the idea that we have passed the point of no return with man-made climate change. There are a lot of ideas on the table when it comes to fighting the environmental impact of humans and technology. And as we move further and further into a world where there is vast scientific consensus on that issue, remember, the quote unquote trust the experts, and a paradoxical public resistance to that idea, because we can think for ourselves, these ideas are getting weirder and weirder. So the section here on marketplace.org's story on meat allergies, and you need to go and, there's a lot of clips of this guy floating around. You can find it, Instagram, Facebook, all of those, and actually hear what he has to say. But this is the basic gist. Reducing the consumption of red meat has long been a mantra for anyone who wants to reduce their carbon footprint. It's tricky math at best, but some have suggested that becoming a vegetarian is even better than getting rid of your car. So this Dr. Lau wants to do this in pill form. Essentially, you could use an ingestible pill or other form of technology that you can swallow to make you feel ill anytime you consume red meat. Or you could just go veggie the old-fashioned way with willpower. However you do it, if we all did it, a recent study from Oxford suggests we could reduce carbon emissions by 63%. So my concern, of course, is that this is not going to be voluntary, and why would anybody ever do something like that voluntarily to maybe try to overcome their willpower? I don't know. But of course, with the recent scientific experiment that was the COVID quote-unquote vaccine, we have seen how the government, for their own purposes and their own goals, has attempted to forcibly inject human beings with experimental medicine. And this is, of course, a serious concern. So let's welcome in Raw Egg Nationalist. He goes by that moniker. He's Charles Cornish Dale, who is an anon, but he's also the author of a few really good books, including The Eggs Benedict Option, hails from the UK, and is an expert in a good way, not in a trust the experts kind of way, on all things kind of nutrition and food consumption related. So I always like to have him on the program when we're talking about these types of issues. And Raw Egg, it's great to have you again. And, this just seems so far-fetched, but also so in line with how crazy the WEF is anymore.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be back, Jenna. Yeah, I'm very familiar with S. Matthew Lau, actually. And in fact, in my book, The Eggs Benedict Option, which I published in 2022, I devoted a section to discussing him and his crazy ideas about the various different ways that we can save the planet from climate change, mainly by reducing, meat consumption involuntarily. So this idea that we could potentially genetically engineer humans or give them a pill to make them basically allergic to meat, it's been around for a while. And that clip actually, I think, was from maybe 2018, maybe even 2017 or 16. He's been saying this stuff for a while. He first came on the scene in about 2012, I think, and there was a big sort of glossy spread, I think, in the Atlantic about him and his kind of crazy ideas for saving the planet. What's interesting, actually, about this idea of making people allergic to meat is that actually it's happening already. So when S. Matthew Lau talks in this video clip about potentially making people allergic to meat, he references a tick-borne allergy called alpha-gal syndrome. Now, this is an allergy that's transmitted by Lone Star ticks. So there's a particular species of tick that you find in the US that has what looks like a sort of lone star on its behind. And what it does is when you're bitten by this tick, it injects a certain compound and it sensitizes your immune system to a protein called alpha-gal. And alpha-gal is found in red meat. And so what that does is that actually basically makes you allergic to red meat. So then when you eat red meat, you have a very, very bad allergic reaction, upset stomach, etc. And what we know actually is that millions of people in the US, potentially maybe even 10 million people or more, they reckon, some experts, have already been bitten by a Lone Star tick and developed this alpha-gal syndrome. So actually, allergies to meat are spreading seriously across the US. I mean, tick-borne diseases are getting worse in the US, and there's a whole sort of conspiracy theory rabbit hole that you can go down, because of course we do know, or we have a good deal of reason to believe, that actually Lyme's disease was originally a biological weapon that was being developed by the US government in Connecticut. There's actually a bioweapons facility at a place called Lyme, Connecticut, which I think is an island, or it's kind of close to the coast. But that's where the first cases of Lyme disease were reported. And we know from various declassified documents that the US government was experimenting from a very early stage, certainly from, I think, the 1940s, 1950s, in using insects, especially ticks, to distribute biological weapons. So there's this whole really this deep rabbit hole that you can go down with tick-borne diseases, the growth of tick-borne diseases over the second half of the 20th century in the US, including this meat allergy. But yes, to get back to the original question, yes, I mean, this is totally in line with all of the kind of crazy stuff that the WEF comes out with periodically. I mean, they've been quite muted recently because, of course, Klaus Schwab has sort of been cancelled for a kind of sexual harassment affair, although he was actually found not guilty by an internal tribunal. But yes, I mean, this is totally in line with what the WF is constantly spouting about, the kind of strange, basically involuntary, unwanted ways in which we're going to have to change our lives in order to cope with the reality of climate change and global demographic explosion and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, they regularly draw on people like this S. Matthew Lau chap to make these really outlandish claims about, how we're going to shrink people. That's one thing that he said, we might reduce people's height by 15%, and that would reduce their carbon footprint by 25%, and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, as silly as it all sounds, I mean, it seems far less silly as a result of, like you said, what happened during the pandemic. I mean, we had basically a global medical tyranny enforced on us, and so all of a sudden these things don't seem quite so silly.
Yeah, and as you're explaining this, I mean, and some of the history of the United States' own involvement in some of these experiments, which obviously we were part of that and complicit in the whole big pharma scam that was everything during COVID. How much do you think part of the whole LGBTQ movement, because this is all about hormone therapies and other things that not only is big pharma profiting on, but you can see physically with a lot of these young men, I mean, who take some of these hormones. I mean, the reduction just in testosterone makes men far weaker. And has actual drastic physical consequences. I mean, is this part of kind of this overall strategy of manipulating humans, not just for the purpose of financial gain, like we generally attribute as the main motive to big pharma, but is it bigger than that in terms of being ideologically based?
I think it's difficult to say. I mean, my latest book, which is about to come out in December via Skyhorse, is called The Last Men, Liberalism and the Death of Masculinity. And it's about testosterone decline, about the decline of masculinity, about modern politics as being fundamentally anti-testosterone. I mean, we live in a world that is fundamentally, I think, at war with masculinity, not just politically, not just ideologically, in the kind of sort of woke kind of stuff that we're all forced to subscribe to, or that they try to force us to subscribe to, but also environmentally in the numerous harmful toxins and harmful substances that we're exposed to on a daily basis that are literally sapping us of our testosterone, sapping men of their vitality. I mean, it's absolutely the case that testosterone decline benefits the prevailing order. That's something that I've always said. If you make men less masculine, if you make them less motivated, less aggressive, less willing to stand up for themselves and their families and the things that they believe in. Of course, that benefits the system, and it certainly benefits a tyrannical system, a system that wants to control people and that wants people to obey orders and just be passive consumers, which is, that is the ideal today. So, I mean, if we lived in a world where we were exposed constantly to toxic chemicals that actually increased our testosterone, then I think that actually governments would have done something about that a long time ago, because it would have made the population far harder to govern. So, I mean, I think it's difficult to say, whether chemicals are deliberately being put in the water and whether people are deliberately being feminized. But it is actually nevertheless the case that the feminization that we see, voluntary, involuntary, whatever, does benefit the system. It does make people easier to rule. It does, definitely.
And we need to take a break here, but we're going to keep a Raw Egg Nationalist on and hold him over into the next break, and we'll continue to talk about all of this because, as we're talking about all of the different ideologies, including Islam that is attempting to take over the West, and we're talking about all of these other, very dangerous threats, I think, to not just Western civilization, but to the rights and freedoms that all human beings possess because we are made in the image of God, so they're pre-political. This issue of bioethics is one that we also need to focus on because it really does hit home in a very tangible way for all of us, and especially in the United States. I mean, we've seen with MAHA how much pushback the left has given to RFK Jr. So we're going to talk about this continuing after the break. We'll be right back with more.
Hi, I'm Tim Moore, Senior Evangelist on Christ in Prophecy. With all the uncertainty in the world today, it's good to know that God's promises never change. On Christ in Prophecy, we'll examine the signs of the times and consider what's really happening in the world today through the lens of God's prophetic word. To hear more biblical hope for the future, join me for Christ in Prophecy, Sundays at 11 a.m. Central, right here on American Family Radio, and find out what's really going on in the world.
Exploring Missions with Pastors Bert and Nathan Harper.
When I became a Christian believer, I felt that God was calling me to go to North India as a witness.
We focus on the most vulnerable in the Metro Atlanta area.
Operation Care International is started in Dallas, and now we have partnered with 52 countries.
Exploring Missions explores missions. Find it on the podcast page at afr.net.
If you are 65 or older, you know this. Inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and co-payments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now. 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
This is Bible League International. Not far from the conflict in the Middle East right now, Mahmoud was an Islamic cleric. He accepted the invitation of a Christian friend to attend a Bible study.
I was born and brought up in a Muslim family. I started reading the Bible not to know the Word of God, but to find out the faults.
The Holy Spirit would convince Mahmoud he was a sinner and there was no other name under heaven by which to be saved except that of Jesus. He was labeled an infidel, kicked out of his village, his family's left him. He's never seen them since. But today he's a pastor and a church planter. He's planted planted 15 churches ranging from 13 to 30 people, and he's praying for Bibles there in the Middle East. By October 31st, Reformation Day, AFR and Bible League want to bless 4,000 Bibleist believers. You've done it for 2,000. We've got a long way to go. So at $5 a Bible, $100 sends 20, 500 sends 100, and every gift matched. Will you call 800-YES-WORD? 800-YES-WORD. That's 800-YES-WORD, or give it sendbiblesnow.org. Sendbiblesnow.org.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we're continuing this discussion with a raw egg nationalist who you can follow on X, and he has a brand new book coming out, and also has a couple of others prior to that, including I think the best known one is the Eggs Benedict option. But talk about your book that's coming out again, if you would, Raw Egg, because this fits into this whole topic about bioethics and what really should define bioethics, not in a world economics kind of globalist sense. But when we're talking about, what kind of policy, not just around healthcare, not just around medicine, but also around food policy, really influences our bodies. And so I'm really looking forward to reading your book.
So the new book is called The Last Men, Liberalism and the Death of Masculinity. It's coming out at the beginning of, or actually mid-December via Skyhorse. And it's really a follow-on from the Tucker Carlson documentary that I was in 2022 called The End of Men, which was about testosterone decline, about the crisis of masculinity, about how exposure to harmful chemicals is basically sapping men of their vitality by sapping them of their testosterone, and about ways in which we can counter this tendency, the kind of things that people like me have been doing, so-called bro scientists, experimenting with things like consuming raw eggs, working out, getting daily sunlight exposure, all this kind of stuff. And so the book really follows on from that, but it poses civilizational decline, testosterone decline rather, as a civilizational problem, which I think it is, because it's not simply the case that men are, being discouraged from being masculine because of woke ideology and because of feminism and the gains that women have made over the last century and economically and socially and politically. It's actually that there is a biological crisis taking place, and that crisis is rooted in the kind of world that we have created, and in particular, we've created this industrial world that relies on all of these different marvelous products of chemistry. Well, the unfortunate thing is that so many of them, and especially chemicals associated with plastic, and we live in a plastic world. I mean, it will be hard to imagine the world today without plastics. I mean, it will be radically different. These chemicals, especially plastic chemicals, have very, very nasty effects on our hormonal systems, and they're interfering with the natural hormonal balance. They're making men have less testosterone. They're making them less fertile. They're making women less fertile too. And so, we've got to try and get a grasp on this problem. And so it ties in as well with the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Make America Healthy Again stuff. He talks about these chemicals at length, and he's made them a particular target for Make America Healthy Again. He was in The End of Men as well with me in this Tucker Carlson documentary. So it's a very, very timely book that really sort of ties in with the ascendancy of the Make America Healthy Again movement, and the fact that it's become actually basically a non-partisan unifying issue. We all want people to be healthier because we're waking up to the fact that actually it's a civilizational problem. It's a political problem. It's a social problem. And it will only get worse if we don't do something about it.
Yeah, and it really should be a nonpartisan issue. But I think that the lines are being drawn certainly between the Make America Healthy Again movement and what RFK Jr., I think rightly is proposing versus, some of these people like we've been talking about, including this doctor at the WEF, S. Matthew Lau, and others of his ilk that see humans as just part of nature, not as a created being in the image of God and having inherent dignity and worth, basically just suggesting that humans need to capitulate to whatever is best for Mother Earth or globalism and the overall environment. And so they put environmentality above anthropology, and that is a very dangerous view. And so, in terms of this clash, where do you see the political and policy lines being drawn? Because I'm seeing a lot of pushback against the Maha movement, while at the same time, I mean, our current U.S. government is shut down basically over the issue that Democrats want to give illegals free subsidized, government subsidized, tax subsidized health care in the United States, which is utterly preposterous.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a crazy idea. It's a recipe for bankrupting the nation. It's a recipe for chaos. It will destroy healthcare. It will make people less healthy, far less healthy. And you can see actually in the UK, for example, that massive influx of migrants has, with a socialized healthcare system, has just destroyed healthcare in the UK. I mean, it's basically impossible to see a doctor now. It's impossible to see a dentist, unless, of course, you're a migrant and you're given preference. But if you're a British person, then it's don't bank on it. You're better off going private if you can afford it. But the lines are being drawn in interesting ways because of course you've got a lot of pushback from industry. There are huge vested interests, big pharma, big food, big ag, all of these, big vested interests. They don't want Make America Healthy Again to work because, of course, it would compromise their profits. It would compromise their business models. But you also, yes, as you say, then you also have there is a certain pushback, I think, as well from the kind of environmental crowd, not least of all because actually it's fairly clear, as somebody like RFK Jr. makes clear, that actually we need to eat animal products to be healthy. And, that's a central plank of the environmental case. The sort of anti-climate change case is that we need to stop eating animal products. We need to adopt a plant-based diet. Well, there's reams and reams of evidence, anthropological, historical evidence, and also scientific evidence when the science isn't biased, that we just have to eat animal products in order to attain optimal health. So the lines are being drawn in all sorts of interesting ways: industry, environmental groups, and also pro-immigration groups, etc. So it's a developing battlefield, I think, and RFK Jr. isn't going to have an easy time of winning. He's going to have to be very canny, very clever, and it's going to have to be a multi-term agenda as well. This is something that I say again and again. We're not going to make America healthy again in 4 years.
Yeah, and we certainly haven't, done all of the things and all of the damage in a short amount of time either. I mean, this has been decades and decades long, and my good friend James Lindsay, who is really brilliant on a lot of these issues as well, he suggested to me one time, which I think is accurate, that we don't even really know the depth of the history of the 20th century and all of the experiments and some of the things that actually occurred in the 20th century. I mean, some of this stuff is becoming declassified, but I think there's a lot more, and I would agree with them. I think there's a lot more. But just in the last 2 minutes or so that we have here, and I know that that's a pretty short amount of time, Raw Egg, what can people do in the meantime to say, okay, well, I'm going to make, more healthy choices myself and not necessarily wait for the FDA to be changed in the whole Maha movement to help make me healthy?
Well, of course, you can start to exercise and get more active. If you're not active, that's a big thing. And I always tell people, start small. Don't be too ambitious. Just if you're out of shape, if you're overweight, just get moving, get walking. That will help and build from there. But really, one of the most fundamental things that you can do is ditch processed food. So that's food wrapped in plastic that you buy, that's made in a factory, that you buy in a supermarket, basically. ditch your processed food because that's pretty much the most unhealthy thing that you can eat. It's exposing you to all sorts of harmful chemicals, additives, ingredients like high fructose corn syrup and seed oils that are just terribly bad for you. Ditch that and learn to cook and prepare food yourself at home. That's one of the most liberating things that you can do. It's one of the best things that you can do for your health. You know what's going into your body, you've prepared it, and you can guarantee that it's high quality and that it's good for you.
Yeah, and that it's fresh. I mean, that's what my sister-in-law, who's a registered dietitian, will always say, you know, if something is packaged and it has a longer shelf life than a week, then you know that there are preservatives and additives and probably things that you don't want in it, which means, you know, you have to go to the store more often, and you do have to cook, but it's one of those things that we need to get back to, which our whole society is not advocating for, and there are so many different ways that we are just so unhealthy. But raw egg, really appreciate it. We're already out of time. Could talk to you so much longer, but thanks so much for your insights. And as always, listeners can reach me and my team at Jenna at afr.net.